that is, I think, what we have an opportunity to really dig into as we confront the full effects of this pandemic. It's part of what I want to do as Surgeon General is to try to drive and support a conversation in our country about how we design that post-pandemic life. Because I think we have an opportunity to come out of this pandemic stronger, more resilient, more fulfilled than before, but only if we do it intentionally.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, and this is the show dedicated to a simple premise that everything and everybody and everything is a brand today. Every personality, every athlete, every celebrity, every company, every product, every religion, every political party, everything is a brand because a brand is a set of values. And what we do on the show, we do a couple of things. We go through the brands of the week, and those are the brands, and they can be people, they can be companies, anything that are kind of setting the zeitgeist about where we're going and how we're getting there. And I'm going to break down the brands that are up and down. And we have a very special guest, the Surgeon General of the United States, Vivek Murthy. Obviously, so important to talk today about to the Surgeon General about the Delta variant and the latest in COVID. And we're going to talk about mental health issues. And I couldn't be more excited to have the Surgeon General here. But first, our brands of the week. Okay, first brand of the week that is way up is Rihanna. Rihanna is officially a billionaire, the world's richest female musician. And what's interesting about that is you kind of go, they said she's worth around $1.7 billion. Now, that's not from singing. I mean, she's got a lot of top records, but that's all coming from, and this is kind of a trend, what we're seeing with entertainers and why they want to become brands and get into businesses. She's got a 50% stake in the Fenty Beauty Cosmetics company which holds a conservative total valuation of about $2.8 billion. So she's worth $1.7 billion, 1.4 of the 1.7 just from that. And it's basically with the French conglomerate LVMH, they launched Fenty Beauty, and its goal was creating inclusive products, including feature harder to find darker shades of makeup for women of color. And that's the future for entertainers and musicians. They're not going to make their main money from making music. She also has another estimated $270 million that comes from her 30% ownership stake in her $1 billion Sauvage X Fenty lingerie line. So if you are somebody right now and you are a rapper or you are a country music star or you are a George Clooney of the world, yes, George Clooney's going to make money from movies, but he made his $300 million from Casamigos. So that's the big story about Rihanna as a brand of the week because she is not a singer. She is a brand. That's what the show is all about. Okay, a brand down to sideways for the Tokyo Olympics. They ended, and the big brand down is NBC's overall TV audience. The game was down on average about 45% compared to the Rio Games, and was down by about 50% in prime time. That's losing half your viewership. And there are two reasons for that. The main reason, of course, is there were three reasons. Big time difference, 13-hour time difference. So, everything was delayed, even though it wasn't. And there's something different when you're watching it and it's not live, particularly because with the internet now, you find out ahead of time. The second it happens, you find out. So you're watching events, you know how they end. Second reason, the stands were empty, and that does affect it. And the third reason, I think we're going to see this going forward, is like everything else, it's harder to keep a big slice of the pie. If you go back to the Olympic Summer Games of 1976, just pick a year. And okay, what did you have at that time? You had your few TV stations, and you had politics, but you didn't have 24/7 politics. And it was a big deal. Now, you didn't have streaming. I could go on, and everybody knows where the technology is. We certainly didn't have smartphones. So I just don't think anything is, with the exception of the Super Bowl, it somehow maintains its viewership. I don't think anything is, because that's the biggest town meeting of the year, is where we all gather. Nothing is able to hold the same slice of the pie anymore. And the Olympics is a perfect example. So they get a brand. And the reason they don't get a complete brand down, it could have been a health debacle. They took all the right precautions. There was no super spreading as a result of it in Tokyo. So a brand slanted sideways down. Big brand up for the USA women's basketball team. Doesn't get enough hype. The men's basketball team, obviously starting with the Dream Team in 1992 was the first time we had professionals in there. Obviously so much hype around them. They did win the gold, the men's, this year, but they did lose 2 exhibition games. They lost the opening game to France. They didn't blow anybody away. The women's basketball team, they won 55 consecutive games. It was their 7th consecutive gold medal. They won 90 to 75 and a victory over over Japan in the final. And of course, their two top players who both grew and built, I think they each won 5 gold medals themselves, is Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird, who are just legendary. And women's basketball still doesn't get its due. The WNBA, yes, it's popular, but it has not caught on. And I think it'll still take another generation or so, but big brand up for the women's basketball team. Huge brand up for NFL teams. Forbes just came out. The average value of NFL franchises are up 14% in the last year, despite a revenue drop for the teams. That is really, there were 20% revenue drop due to coronavirus in the year 2020, yet the value of the teams went up 14%. So that's a pretty good business model. And there were 2 reasons for that. The main reason was they signed a new TV deal that basically increased their 82% average annual increase in the payouts to each team, went from 220 to 377 million because of TV rights. TV rights basically are a $112 billion package across networks. The most valued team is expensive franchise are the Dallas Cowboys at $6.5 billion, an $800 million increase over their value in 2020. So that must make Jerry Jones very happy. New England Patriots are number 2 at $5 billion, and the Giants and Rams and Washington football team followed up. The least lucrative team and the least valuable team is the Buffalo Bills at $2.27 billion. But a big brand up. You own a football team, you're in pretty good shape. And look, there's very few things that have to be live anymore. And certainly pro sports and football, which was the most lucrative sports, is one of them. And they will continue to hold their value. That is for sure. As content is king, and it is the only place to get male eyeballs on a mass scale, it will just keep going up and up and up and up. So, if you got a few billion lying around, you got nothing to spend it on, buying an NFL football team is a pretty good investment and certainly lots of fun. Brand up for Tom Brady for being one of the really smart football players. And he basically called his fellow NFL players, referring to a lot of them as ignorant. And here's why. And I don't blame him for saying that. The salary cap, which is, of course, what the teams are allowed to play players, has dropped 20%, while the value of franchises went up 14%. And they didn't announce the salary cap till the day, they didn't announce the new TV deals worth $112 billion until the day after the salary cap. Now, if I were the players, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I might have figured out, let's wait to see what the TV deal, let's see what the new value of the franchises is, and then we'll negotiate our contracts. Because look, they are the stars. That's what people are not going to pay. They're not going to see Robert Kraft. They're not paying to see Jerry Jones. They're paying to see Brady. They're paying to see Patrick Mahomes. And, the fact, and basketball has caught up with the players' salaries have gone through the roof because the valuations of the team have gone through the roof. But the fact that the salary cap dropped 20% is ridiculous. So yes, the players have got to get smarter. This is ridiculous. You are what people are going to see. And your salary cap should have gone up at least 14%. And if I was negotiating for you guys, would have been 25%. Okay. A brand down, and he's pretty much here every week for different reasons. Our good friend Donald Trump, for 2 reasons. The first, he's getting it's almost he's got a silly quality to him now. He doesn't have the presidential seal in front of him. He's a decaying brand. And when you used to say things, you used to get angry. Now you just kind of go, you just roll your eyes. He just slammed the U.S., not just last week, the U.S. women's soccer team would have gold if they were not so woke. He literally said, woke means you lose. Everything that is woke goes bad. And our soccer team certainly has. They got the bronze and not the gold. And woke because they've taken on a lot of social issues. They've gotten involved with the national, some of them kneeled before the national anthem and done things. And everything woke is broke, according to Donald Trump, you moron. But here's where he really gets his brand down for the week. And this just sums up everything where Trump is right now and the mindset of his followers. Trump is hawking tacky gold-leaded Trump cards for MAGA diehards. That's right. He's kind of running out of ways to kind of like shake down his audience. So his latest cash grab is offering MAGA diehards these pointless plastic cards to prove their support. According to Insider, emails went out to Trump supporters on Wednesday night asking them to choose their favorite design, what the campaign is inevitably dubbed Trump cards. They're going to be blood red with gold lettering and display his name and a membership number. The card you select will be carried by all patriots around the country. There will be a sign of your dedicated support for our movement to save America, and I'm putting my full trust behind you. And of course, if you go to apply for a Trump card. The link takes you right into one of his fundraising portals. And this is this is a very interesting into the mind, how Trump understands the mindset of many of his mindless followers. You're going to pay me to carry a laminated card in your pocket that gives you an identity. You have an identity number as a Trumper and that you are a patriot, so you can take it out and show people I'm a patriot. I mean, if there's nothing that symbolizes the inanity of Trump and his followers and their need to wear this badge and the power of just him understanding that they want that identity. They want to carry a card in their pocket, a gold embossed card that says Trump, and that will give them some sense of value themselves. So brand down for Trump, brand down for Trump cards, brand down for people buying Trump cards. God bless you all. Brand up for these following corporations. I've talked a lot about that as far as fighting the coronavirus. Companies and private sector has to take it into their own hands. And I'm just going to give you a list of companies this week that just came out and said, guess what? You're an employee. You're getting vaccinated or you're no longer an employee. You're not coming to work. Anthem, BlackRock, Cisco, Delta, DoorDash, Equinox, Facebook, Ford, Goldman Sachs, Google, Jefferies, Lyft, Microsoft, Netflix, the New York Times, Saks, Salesforce, Twitter, Tyson Foods, Uber, Union Square Hospitality Group, United Airlines, Walgreens, the Walt Disney Company, Walmart, and the Washington Post. God bless you all. I mean, it's not complicated. We've got to continue to pressure and make, I don't want to say outcasts in certain levels, people who won't get vaccinated. You know, I was on the air the other day and a doctor gave a great analogy is, they're like drunken drivers. If you're not vaccinated, you're a drunken driver. You're making it unsafe for other people. Yes, you have the freedom to do what you want. And no, you don't. You can't drive drunk. That's against the law. And we've got to get it in line where you just have to get a vaccine. A mandate is, to me, the answer. And if the government's not going to do it, the same way they mandate other vaccines, if you want to go to school, if you want to go into certain businesses, if you want to travel, it's the only way we're going to stay safe, kids. And special kudos to CNN and my friend Jeff Zucker, who actually fired 3 employees for coming into the office unvaccinated against the vaccine last week when they had a policy of just being vaccinated. And he fired him. Good for you. Way to go, Jeff Zucker. Brand up for old Jeff Zucker and CNN. Brand down for Democratic Representative Cori Bush. Cori Bush, he basically, I want to read a quote, what she said. I'm sorry, what he said. He said, I'm going to make sure I have security because I know I have had attempts on my life. And if I have too much work to do there are too many people I need help right now for me to allow that. So if I end up spending $200,000 or if I spend $10 more on security, you know what? I get to be here to do the work. And the final sentence, so suck it up, and defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police and put that money into social safety nets. So Cori Bush is basically saying that wants private security, was willing to pay for whatever it takes. I understand if you're a congressperson today, you need that private security. But then in the final sentence and say, and oh, by the way, let's defund the police. Come on, brand down for Cori Bush. Huge brand down. He shows up on the show a lot, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson decided to do his show on Fox last week from Hungary. And his whole thing was he was sitting down with Prime Minister Viktor Orban. And Viktor Orban is a dictator. He's an out-and-out dictator. He controls the media. He basically, Sherry Byrne, professor of political science at Barnard College, author of Democracy and Dictatorship in Europe, says at this point, Hungary is on full-on dictatorship. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. He's unabashedly xenophobic and bigoted, instituting policies against migrants. The LGBT community have been condemned worldwide. He's used the pandemic as a pretext for attacks on the rule of law. And Tucker Carlson felt in his wisdom, in his grand scheme of things, that he's broadcasting because he basically presented the U.S. as less free than Hungary. And he attacked the democracy watchdog that's raising alarms about the erosion of democratic institutions in Hungary. He seems to think there's a lot right going on there. Why don't you fucking move to Hungary, Tucker Carlson? If you think we're less free here, go do your show from Hungary. We don't need you here. I mean, this guy's going to blow up. Tucker Carlson has gotten to a place where he feels that it is his mission to somehow educate the rest of us in ways that we are uneducated. And he is a fool. He, to me, is the opposite of a patriot. I find him dangerous, one of the most dangerous men in America. And I love Seth MacFarlane. Now, the reason I'm bringing Seth MacFarlane in, He's claiming he wants to take Family Guy. Of course, he's a creator of Family Guy off of Fox because of Tucker Carlson, because of Fox News, and he's threatening. They've done it for 19 seasons. It, of course, makes billions for Fox. And he's basically saying, I don't know how serious he is, but if you have Tucker Carlson, maybe it's the wrong network for me. So good for you, Seth MacFarlane, and you're an asshole, Tucker Carlson. Louis C.K. Louis C.K., I'm not going to say a brand up because I can't give a brand up for a guy that's been accused of what he's been, or admitted, not accused, but interesting in how a brand can survive. Now, of course, he in 2017 admitted to basically taking out his penis in front of women and masturbating in front of them, and he was thrown off Netflix and the other places they were carrying him. But he's starting a tour. He's going on a 5-month tour, performing 24 cities, including Albany, San Diego, Philadelphia, Minneapolis. He's starting at Madison Square Garden. And he said, I'm really looking forward to seeing your faces. I tell some rather impolite jokes and stories. And the reason he can survive, he doesn't need I guess, look, these venues are corporations, but he will never get a streaming show again, I don't believe. He will never get a network show again. But as he can do individual shows. And I guess that's interesting. I guess Madison Square Garden and the various big arenas will not get or saying, okay, it's okay for him to speak. Whereas certainly if you're advertiser-based or even if you're subscriber-based, like a network or streaming service, you cannot give him that second chance. But he will be getting it on the tours. I hope that there is self-awareness there. And obviously it's going to be interesting to see what he does. So a brand question mark for Louis C.K. Still a brand down, but brand question mark is his brand being resurrected, I guess, in this way it is. And he's looks like he'll be getting a second chance. Huge brand up to Apple. Apple, this is great. And this is where the tech companies have got to start asserting themselves in many ways. I've talked a lot about with Facebook and the virus and misinformation and the insurrection. Apple on Thursday says it's going to start checking iPhone and iCloud photos for child abuse imagery. Apple on Thursday says beginning testing a new system to automatically match photos on iPhones and uploaded iCloud accounts to a database of child sexual abuse images and alert authorities as needed. The new service, listen to this, will turn photos on devices into an unreadable set of hashes or complex numbers stored on user devices, the company explained. Those numbers will be matched against a database of hashes provided by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So God bless you, Apple. They should be doing things like this. So any pornographic child imagery, inappropriate child imagery on someone's phone, turn into certain hash marks. And if those hash marks relate to ones that show up on a missing child registry or abused child registry, they will be getting these vulgar people. So Apple, huge brand up. Brand out for Tesla. They got a big snub at the White House. The White House had this big event boosting electric cars. And on Thursday, Biden was zipped around the White House in Jeep's new plug-in hybrid Wrangler that delivers 375 horsepower. He was there was the Bronco there, and he quipped that the GM, General Motors CEO, Mary Barra, had promised him a test drive for the first electric model of his favorite Chevrolet Corvette. Tesla is famously anti-union, whereas Detroit's Big Three are on a shrinking list of major employers who use organized labor. So I guess that's why they're not there. But I don't think you're doing a service, Joe Biden, if you're doing a whole event on electric cars and you don't have Tesla there. Whether they are unionized or not, I don't know. They belong there. So I guess it's not a brand down for Tesla. It's a brand down for Joe Biden for snubbing Tesla. A brand, I don't know, for the Zapp 1300 scooter. I brand down because to me it feels unsafe. You see these images in other countries here. Now, it's an electric scooter that goes as fast as a motorcycle. It's a new high-performance electric scooter being billed as transportation solution for urban residents who want an electric vehicle but don't have dedicated parking. It's 200 pounds. It goes 0 to 30 in 2.3 seconds, and its top speed is at 60 miles an hour. It's a little scooter. Now, powered road legal scooters are popular in many parts of the world. $100 billion global scooter market. Now it's going electric, but I don't know. These scooters that go 60 miles an hour zipping around, they feel unsafe to me. I wouldn't want to see them in New York City. So I am anti the Zapp 1300 scooter. I'm probably taking a lot of crap for that because I'm sure there's a lot of people that like that, but it scares me. brand down, no surprise for business travel. So really incredible stats coming out of the pandemic. Corporate travel is projected to remain at just 30% of pre-pandemic levels. So it's dropped by 70% business travel. So, I mean, that's why the airlines are in such tough shape. And basically, recent Wall Street Journal analysts project the pandemic would permanently reduce business travel by 20 to 40%. I say 50 to 60%. Look, when I was running a company, I used to travel for business. It used to drive me insane. For a 2-hour meeting, I would waste a day and a half. If it was on the West Coast, it was 2 days, or sometimes it was a full day, depending on where you're going. And between technology and the problem of pandemic, there are very few reasons. Yes, there is something to be said for pressing the flesh, but everything can be done right now by video conference. And video conference is not the right technical word, but by video or some form of technology. And, to waste times flying back and forth across the country, I know Wall Street Journal projects business travel down 20 to 30. I say it's going to stay down 50%. Target, huge brand up for Target, probably my brand of the week. Target has announced that it will begin paying the college tuition and textbook expenses for its U.S.-based part-time and full-time employees who attend select schools. Listen, they're going to be paying college tuition and tech. This is amazing. For 250 programs at over 40 schools, more than 340,000 employees at Target stores take advantage. They're going to be putting $200 million in the next 4 years to make it all possible. Paying for college, paying for textbooks for their workers. What's better than that? How do we move forward as a society? I keep loving these companies that are really, really jumping in and making us a better world. And look, they do it. Part of the reason they're doing it, it's so hard to get workers today more than ever. I mean, post-COVID and post the stimulus, every company is looking for work or warehouse. So somebody like Target's looking for sales workers and warehouse workers. And so it's one more way to attract them. So yes, there is a commercial interest for them, but it moves our society forward. So I'm giving Target a big brand up there. Big brand up for Ikea. Ikea is an old client of mine, of course, the Swedish furniture store. They're releasing a limited edition candle that smells like its famous Swedish meatballs. Yes, if you don't know Ikea has restaurants in all the stores in addition to, play centers for kids, and then you can get their famous Swedish meatballs there. And now to celebrate the 10th anniversary of its family program, Ikea is launching a limited edition candle, which smells like Swedish meatballs. And there you go. What else do you need to know? To acquire one of there's only 1,900 available candles. You have to enter a sweepstakes. I would love a candle that smells like Swedish meatballs. Look, we had ice cream that tasted like mac and cheese that we had a brand week up a few weeks ago from Kraft. So why not candles that smell like Swedish meatballs? Dogs and cats sleeping together. That's a great line from Ghostbusters, by the way. And finally, the Big Mac. Wisconsin man marks 32,340 Big Macs eaten since 1972. He has eaten more Big Macs than anybody else. I'm fair to say that. He's got the Guinness Book of World Records. It's been a big part of his life. He says he averaged 2 of the Big Mac sandwiches a day since 1972. Do the math, 32,340 Big Macs for Donald Gorski. Donald, I hope you're feeling well. And those are our brands of the week. Now let's get to our interview with the Surgeon General. Vivek Murthy is one of the most important men in America today, obviously leading the fight against coronavirus. He's also an advocate on mental health and obviously talks a lot about how coronavirus is affecting mental health. And let's get the latest update on what is going on with corona from our Surgeon General. I think you'll really enjoy my talk. Okay, I want to talk to you about monkeypox, and this is great. You're gonna have to listen to me on this one. The best bacon, the best steak, the best chicken, the best salmon you've ever eaten won't come from the grocery store or a restaurant. You'll find it on the family farm and caught by independent Alaskan fishermen. That's why you need moinkbox.com. Here's the deal. Delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork, and chicken, wild-caught salmon, direct to your door, helping family farms across the country become financially independent outside of big ag. Their animals are raised outdoors. Their fish swim in the wild ocean. The Moink meat is free of antibiotics, hormones, sugar, and all of the junk you find in the prepackaged in the meat aisle. Sign up at moinkbox.com/Donny to get, and this is my favorite offer ever on the show, a year of bacon free. I'm going to say it again. I do a lot of advertising on the show. This one stops me every time, and I got to repeat it. Moinkbox.com/Donny, get a year of bacon free. I just get happy saying get a year of bacon free, all right? You change what you get each month. You can cancel anytime. And I got to tell you, it's fresh. It's great. You're supporting small farms around the country. Moink was founded by an 8th generation farmer who was featured on Shark Tank. The host, Kevin O'Leary, said it's best bacon he's ever tasted. They guarantee you'll say, oink, oink. I'm just so happy I got moinked. And they have a great slogan also, free bacon for a year and oink, oink. I'm so happy I just got moinked. Here you join the Moink movement today. Go to Moinkbox. That's moinkbox.com/Donny right now. And listeners of the show will get free bacon for a year. I feel like this is part of my mission to bring you free bacon for a year. That's one of the best bacon you'll ever have taste for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/Donny. That's moinkbox.com/Donny. Get your free bacon for a year. What could be better? Okay, I want to talk to you about Indeed. And I ran a big business. No matter what kind of business you run, big or small, the success depends on the people, the kinds of people you hire, how you're able to hire them, how you're able to keep them. And this is where Indeed comes in. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all your hiring in one place, even interviewing. Don't just wish or hope for the perfect candidate. Indeed's hiring tools help you cut through the noise faster and smarter. Match provides a list of quality candidates whose resumes are on Indeed the moment you post a sponsored job. So the second you put that job up, they're going to match you with very, 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 very terrific, well-matched candidates. Indeed Instant Match helps you make a short list of great candidates fast. The moment you sponsor a job, you get a list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Then you can invite them to apply right then. Helps you hire great people fast. Plus, it makes finding quality candidates even faster with 135 assessments to help you make sure you find your applicants with the right skills. Best of all, you only pay for the applicants who meet your must-have qualifications. According to Talent Nest, Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined. Join more than 3 million businesses. Look, 3 million businesses have hired Indeed. It's for a reason. You got to hire people. You want to put a job up there. You want instant matches. They'll make it happen. Go to Indeed, get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/onbrand. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/onbrand. Indeed.com/onbrand. Offer valid through September 30th. Terms and conditions apply. Go to Indeed. You got to listen to me. Just check it out. These are where you're going to find the right people for your business. I'm so excited for today's guest. He is right now one of the most important people in the world, the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. Doctor, thank you so much for being here today. I know how busy you are. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad we're having this conversation, Donny. Looking forward to it.
So first of all, just let's take the temperature. How are we today? Obviously, we're all well too aware that the Delta variant has really kicked in, and we're in a very kind of big question mark place right now. So just kind of give us a health update on where we stand right now.
Well, absolutely, Donny. And look, I know it's been a long 18 months for folks who've been battling this pandemic for a while now, and it's affected all of us in some way or another. And yes, we are in the midst of a Delta wave, a wave of COVID driven by this latest variant that's far more transmissible than anything we've seen to date. And the tough news is that the cases are still rising. Right now, we've broken through 100,000 cases a day. We are seeing deaths and hospitalizations go up. But the good news is that we're not seeing the deaths and hospitalizations go up nearly to the same extent as they were going up earlier in the year when we were experiencing the winter surge back in January. And there's a key reason for that, and it's the vaccines. We've got 165 million people who are fully vaccinated right now. That's extraordinary, and it's really important because those people are highly protected from severe disease and from dying from COVID-19. Even in this small chance that they get a breakthrough infection, it will be mild or asymptomatic, which means they may not feel anything. So that's the really good news. But we still have millions more people that we've got to vaccinate in our country. So, while we have a lot of work to do, and while we still have to be cautious as we learn more about this Delta variant, I don't want people to lose sight of the extraordinary progress that we've made as a country. The economy has rebounded. Our kids are going to be getting back to school soon, and many have already started school again. We know more about how to protect ourselves from the variant, and particularly with masks. And we have, most of all, a vaccine, which is going to protect us and is protecting millions already.
Yeah. So obviously the $1 million question is right now we're up to, I think, 60% of all Americans have gotten 2 vaccines, 70% 1 vaccine. The concerning part is that with the Delta variant, that to get herd immunity, we've got to get up to 80 or 90. Help us figure. I mean, and I've talked a lot about this on the show, and give us the main reasons people are, from your point of view, and I've read a lot of the research, are not getting vaccinated. And what I get asked this question all the time: what the hell can we do to get those people vaccinated? Because everything else is discussion until that happens. So what, I've been asked everything from, do incentives work? Do we give people money? Do we frighten people? I've even had a suggestion, let's call this the Trump vaccine. Let's give him credit and whatever gets people vaccinated. So if you are the czar, basically, and so what do we do to get these people vaccinated?
Well, it's the exact right question, Donny, that we should be asking right now. And it turns out when you talk to people out in the community, as I know you and I both do, when you look at the research on this, there are a couple of things that come up. One of them is that there's not one single reason why people are not vaccinated. There are several, and we've got to be able to tackle all of them. But one of the most common reasons that people are not vaccinated has to do with misinformation. We know that of the people who are unvaccinated right now, about 2/3 of them either believe common myths about COVID-19 vaccination or think those myths might be true. Myths like the COVID vaccine causes COVID, which it absolutely does not, but it's a common myth that's out there, or myths about infertility or DNA mutations resulting from the vaccine, which are also not true, or about microchips being in the vaccine, which are absolutely not true. So that, we can talk about why and how that misinformation is spread, but it's there. And the way that we have to counter it is actually through trusted voices being out there talking to folks. And trusted voices are often local. And that's one of the critical pieces here is that, many people, about 80% on polls, say they want to talk to their doctor to understand more about their decision to get vaccinated or not. That's a trusted voice. We know that faith leaders can often be that trusted voice. But interestingly, family and friends, Donny, show up often on these polls as folks that people want to talk to as they make their decision. About 50% of people say they want to talk to a family member or a friend about it. And the proof is actually a bit in the pudding, too. When you look at the folks who have changed their mind between January and now about getting vaccinated, one of the key reasons is that they saw family and friends around them get vaccinated and do okay. And they had conversations with their doctors about getting vaccinated. So that's got to be a key part of what we do. But there's another piece I think that will help here. And you're seeing it happen more institutions around the country, which are requirements for vaccines. Now, none of us like to be required to do anything, and I get that. But what businesses are increasingly considering, and what many universities have already started to require, are vaccinations if people want to participate either in the workplace or if they want to come to the learning environment in university. And you can understand why they're doing it, because they first and foremost want to make sure that their place of learning and work is as safe as possible. And I don't think you can fault a university or workplace for wanting that. You've also, this week, you saw in New York City say that they were going to require proof of vaccination for dining indoors and for other indoor activities, including gyms. And again, they're doing that because they know that gyms and indoor dining, like when you're doing those kind of activities, that the risk can be higher, of spreading the virus. And so you want to make sure it's as safe as possible. So I think you're going to see this more and more. And finally, Donny, consider hospitals. We have a tradition of requiring vaccinations among healthcare workers. We do that for the flu vaccine and for other vaccines like hepatitis B. More health systems are moving to do that for COVID-19 as well, because it's part of what we've got to do to protect the people that we're caring for, the patients who come to our hospitals and clinics. So I do think that will have a material effect, Donny, on moving the needle. One last thing I'll share is just, frankly, Delta itself. I think it is more people read about it and hear about how dangerous it is as a variant. I do think it's motivating more people to reconsider the vaccine. And all this together, Donny, what's encouraging is you're seeing the vaccination rate actually go up over the last couple of weeks. And in states that have been hardest hit, you're actually seeing a tripling of the rate. That's what we're seeing in Mississippi and Alabama, in Arkansas and Louisiana.
I want to go back to misinformation because that's such a big part of it. And I've talked a lot on the show, and I've called Facebook out every which way that can be called. That Facebook, which half the people in the world get their news from Facebook, and that there were really 12 sources that are putting out 65% of the misinformation today. They've narrowed it. You guys have narrowed it down. So as Surgeon General, just like we put, on cigarette packs, this will cause, harm. What can we do? And I know you put out advisories, and that was a first step. What's the next bold step we can take? Because as a business person, I see it's a very simple cause of this problem. I mean, it's just there's misinformation, so we can stop the misinformation. So what's the next step from your point of view, and what's under your auspices that we can make these companies that have trillion-dollar valuations accountable for this?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you raised this, Donny, because misinformation itself isn't new, right? People have been circulating rumors about health for generations. But what is new is the speed, the scale, and the sophistication with it spreading. And it is being largely aided and abetted by technology companies that have not put sufficient guardrails in place to prevent their users from harm. And one of my big concerns, Donny, has also just been the lack of transparency that we've seen with many of the companies, which, they'll tell you, how many posts they're addressing, but they won't tell you how many problematic posts there are. So are they addressing 10 out of a million or 10 out of 15? You just don't know. And so there's a real transparency and accountability problem. I think for a long time in the tech world, there's this notion that, our job is to build things, and however people use them, they use them. The ill effects aren't really our responsibility. I don't think that's an appropriate view that we should have of technology, especially one that touches billions of people. So a few things I think that can happen. Number one, as you noted, we issued my office an advisory, Surgeon General's advisory on the confronting health misinformation, where we specifically called out technology companies for the role that they're playing and laid out a series of steps that they can and need to take. And additionally, what we need to do now is continue to press them on those goals and on being transparent. And we need to pull in, as we are doing right now, partners from the private sector, including parents who care about this, health professionals who are dealing with this health misinformation every day in their patient population, researchers who are the ones who can also help hold these companies accountable by analyzing the data, but they need that data first. Look, there are other steps that can be taken by people outside of our office. We know that Congress has the power to certainly put rules in place that govern the use, and govern how these technology companies operate. That's not something that my office does, but that is something certainly Congress has been considering and could consider further. But however we do it, most importantly, we as society, we've got to hold these companies accountable. And as users, we have decisions we make every day, right, when we go on these platforms about what we choose to share. And one of the things we put forth in the advisory very clearly is that we need to raise the bar as users on what we share. Ask before you share something about health, is it coming from a scientific, credible source? Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you're not sure. But what we should do is, if we're not sure, don't share, because we can inadvertently be spreading misinformation that can harm others.
I want to talk about Wondery and their new series, Business Wars, The Birth of Vegas. Look, Las Vegas, there's no other place on earth like it. Every year, 50 million visitors flock to the Oasis and happily empty their wallets into the city's economy. But while Vegas may be entertainment capital of the world, it has a very dark, very crime-riddled history. Throughout the 20th century, untold sums have been laundered through Vegas Strip, and casino-owning billionaires have exerted untold influence on American business and politics. In each season of the Business Wars podcast from Wondery, you'll hear riveting stories of rival businesses battling for supremacy. The newest season explores Vegas. We're going from a sleepy desert town to a powerhouse for the dark side. In the last 7 decades, organized crime families, both the federal and Nevada state government, and a handful of powerful billionaires have all fought for control over Vegas. It's an incredible story. So I'm telling you, Wondery is great. And this Business War series is off the charts. And this Vegas episode, you got to listen to the episodes about Vegas. Listen to Business Wars, Birth of Vegas on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or you can listen to it 1 week early and ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app. The Wondery app, you got to go there. They've got great, great, great content. And this latest one on Business Wars, The Birth of Vegas, it's great. So once again, go to the Wondery app, Wondery, to listen to The Birth of Vegas. It's part of the Business Wars series. I want to talk to you about trustandwill.com. That's trustandwill.com. Look, we're all going to need a will at some point. We're all going to need to plan. But this is not just for older people. You know, it's just at any point of your life. If you're buying a house, if you're just starting a family, if you're building wealth, you got to secure the future, and you're going to need a trust and will. This is the easy place to do it. For as little as $39, You can nominate guardians for your children, determine who gets your stuff, and plan for future medical care, all from the comfort of your home. Look, hiring a traditional estate attorney can cost thousands, and using a one-size-fits-all template is not nearly specialized enough. Trust and will documents are designed by estate planning experts and customized for the state you live in. And with live customer support 7 days a week, trustandwill.com's team is available to answer any questions you have while setting up your plan. And once again, trusts and wills are just not for old people. It's for different life stages. Once again, you're buying a house, you're starting a family, you're starting to accumulate wealth. You need to do this. Trust and Will is the most trusted name in online estate planning, the category leader on Trustpilot, and they've helped hundreds of thousands of people protect their families, assets, and legacy. Gain peace of mind at trustandwill.com/Donny and get 10% off plus free shipping of your customized legal documents. Don't wait. Go right now. This is really important. Get 10% off plus free shipping at trustandwill.com/Donny, trustandwill.com/Donny. You need to start planning now. It's not too late. You don't want to waste thousands on estate planners. Trustandwill.com. Look, I've got my will and trust my estate set up, and it was a very laborious process. I wasted a lot of money on various estate attorneys. I wish I kind of had this process to simplify it for me. So yes, do it. Listen to me. I'm not kidding here. Go to trustandwill.com/Donny. If let's say we were partners and we had a 30-second TV commercial to make on the Super Bowl, and there's one objective, we're going to have 100 million people watching it, and there's one objective, to get people vaccinated. If you had 30 seconds to give a message, because there's so many different ways at this, and there's so many reasons why. If we were working, you were a client and I was the agency guy, what direction would you give me to fill in that 30-second? Or what do you think would be the ultimate pressure points at the end with all the research you've looked at?
I'll tell you, but I give you a big caveat first. The first thing I'd say to you is there's not one spot that's going to work for all of America. That what we need is actually multiple messages tailored to different communities, because that's what we've learned actually works. But the broad points I think that are really important that I'd emphasize would be this. It's number one, everything we have learned over the last 8 months is that vaccines save lives. They keep you out of the hospital. They protect your loved ones. And we've already lost 610,000 of our loved ones. That is the single most important set of reasons to get vaccinated. And for all those out there who want to get back to their way of life, who want to see friends again, who want to have slumber parties with their kids, who want to be able to go to concerts and not worry about getting infected, the vaccine is our key to ending the pandemic. Scientists have studied it. These are safe and effective. That's why we've got to use them. And these are the key points I know that people care about. Folks, they want to know that they and their loved ones are going to be safe. Yeah. That's the bottom line. That's what we all share. And that's what the vaccines give us.
When you say there's not one message, obviously, I want to focus a little bit on one group that is 18 to 24-year-olds that only 50% are vaccinated. And whether it's their, the main reason they're giving is, I'm not going to get it. It's not going to hurt me. What's the targeted message? Because that's a big chunk of people right there. If we could solve that problem, we're getting a long way to herd immunity. And there's still, you just common sense tells you don't have to be a marketer to know that an 18 to 24-year-old is probably more malleable and swayable than a 65-year-old that has spent the last 40 years kind of really entrenched in their opinions.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Donny. And I'll tell you what I think is important, but probably won't sway them, which is the health benefit. And I think, look, a lot of young people care about their health. I think for many of them, their parents are probably more concerned about their health than they may be at the moment. All of us, when we're young, we have a sense of invincibility. And the truth is that young people do actually much better with COVID than older people do. So while it's important to remind them that young people have lost their lives, ended up in the hospital, had long COVID syndrome with persistent shortness of breath and chest pain and fatigue, and that the COVID vaccine can help prevent that, I actually think one of the most compelling things to message to young people is that what they can get back if we all get vaccinated are the things that they loved doing before this pandemic. Many young people have had to spend the last year out of school. They've missed graduations. They haven't been able to hang out with friends. They haven't been able to travel around the country, around the world. They haven't been able to do the things that young people want to do, explore the world, live life to its fullest extent. But we can get that back, and we can get it back if more and more of us get vaccinated. If we had more people vaccinated now, we wouldn't be seeing the surge with Delta that we're seeing. And so that's really the key to getting back to normal. And I think that's ultimately what young people want right now.
Let's go even younger. Obviously, a big question for so many people is kids at this point. I mean, that's kind of the big X factor is that our kids are still vulnerable. We're all more fearful of vaccines, either with or without for our kids. Everything gets very, very heightened. So what does the future look like for vaccinations for kids?
Well, I think if you look at adolescents, so 12 to 18, a group for whom thankfully we do have vaccines available right now, we've actually been seeing the vaccination rates increase among adolescents, which is good. And that involves messaging directly to adolescents as well as to their parents. With younger than 12, and this is a group that's particularly personally important to me because I have a
Sure.
3 and a 4-year-old at home, and I want to make sure they can get vaccinated as soon as possible. We don't yet have a vaccine for them, but there are trials underway. And I'm optimistic that if everything does work out, if the trials go well, the companies submit quickly and the FDA does its thorough review, but prioritizes these vaccines, that we could even see a candidate vaccine that's available for younger kids by the end of the calendar year or the very beginning of next year. So that would be great. So I think that's what the future looks like. But I think that what we're going to have to do to make sure that the vaccine actually then gets to kids is several things. One is we're going to have to continue to accelerate our conversations with parents, right? Because parents, and I say this as a fellow parent, are rightly, going to be very, very careful about what vaccines
we're more worried about our kids than we are ourselves. I mean, absolutely. I mean, as parents,
Exactly. I would more likely put myself at risk than my child, and that's rightly so. So we're going to have to spend a lot of time with parents explaining to them what we've understood from the data about the safety in particular. But the second thing that we've got to do is work really closely with pediatricians and with family medicine doctors. We've started doing that with adolescents. But the good thing about pediatricians, Donny, is, and you might remember this from when your kids had to go to the doctor, and I felt I'm certainly still in that stage. But they're really, really good at explaining vaccines to parents, and this is what they do, like day in and day out, especially for younger kids. And so we've got to really build that strong partnership. We've been doing it with adolescents; it's been working well. We've got to support pediatricians in doing it for younger kids. Lastly, look, there's a school component to this as well, which is we know that the local decisions that school districts make and have made for years around vaccines have to do with requiring certain vaccines that they know will help prevent the spread of illness in children. The measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine is one of those that the vast majority of school districts require for children. Will school districts end up requiring the COVID-19 vaccine? We don't know. That's a decision that'll be made locally. But I think if that happens, that might certainly increase the likelihood that folks get vaccinated. So a number of strategies we've got to take with kids. But look, the good news is kids do well overall. The bad news is that not all of them survive COVID. Not all of them come through unscathed. And they also do participate in the chain of transmission. And so if we want to tamp this pandemic down, if we want to protect our children, vaccination is ultimately going to be the best pathway.
Yeah, of course. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to use a jumping off point. You talked about how pediatricians are good at explaining things. You gave a very, very compelling commencement address at Berkeley for the School of Public Health, and you talked about kind of 3 commitments that, because obviously we talk so much on the receiving end as patients, but so much gets solved with our healthcare workers, how they approach things, and talk to us. It was so interesting, those kind of 3 different kind of pillars you talked about that was so interesting.
Well, thanks, Donny. I love doing commencement addresses because they force me to reflect more deeply on what really matters in life. But a couple of things that I said to the graduates that that I'll just run through, and one of them is to recognize first and foremost that your happiness, your engagement in the world, the sustainability with which you do your work and serve your mission in the world, these are deeply connected to your relationships with other people. That our relationships are our anchors. They're the fuel that allows us to do more and to be more in the world. And as obvious as that may seem, that's actually not how many of us live our lives, right? Like many of us live our lives centered around work, and we fit relationships in where they can. I've certainly done that for much of my life. And it took a series of difficult experiences in my own life to make me realize that that was not the path to happiness. It actually wasn't even the path to sustainable contribution to the world. It was the path to burnout, to unhappiness, to depression. And I experienced all of those, including loneliness over the years, because I was not putting people at the center of my life. And that is one of the core pillars, that I always talk to younger folks about and that I try to remind myself about, which is that if we want to build a truly fulfilling life, we have to think about what it means to design a life that's truly centered around people. The other thing that I that I shared in that commencement speech was the importance of not staying in your lane. Many times we're told, okay, well, if you're a lawyer, this is the kind of stuff you do. If you're a business person, that's the kind of stuff you do. If you're a teacher, this is your lane. If you're a doctor, you just focus on what happens in the clinic. You don't talk about stuff outside the clinic. I don't actually think that people are well served or society is well served by people staying in their lanes like that. I think teachers have a lot to say and teach us about public policy. I think that people in business have a lot to say about health because they have been thinking about the health of their employees and it has an impact on their well-being and on productivity. And I think that doctors and nurses have a whole heck of a lot to say about how we design society, whether that's from housing or transportation, because those have profound impacts on health. And so this notion that we stay within our lanes, I think doesn't serve us well in terms of broader conversation in society. And if anything, I think we need more thoughtful, informed voices in our public dialogue than less. And so I encourage people not to stay in their lane, to think creatively about where they choose to use their voice, recognizing their voice is deeply needed. But the piece that I'll come back to finally is just the part about relationships. And Donny, I spent in particular a long time studying and trying to understand the epidemic of loneliness that we're dealing with in our country and really in many countries are dealing with around the world. It's not something we talk about often. Something that has a lot of stigma that surrounds it. But as somebody who's personally struggled with loneliness as a child and at many points during adulthood, including during my first stint as Surgeon General, I can tell you that the loneliness is not something that only affects a few of us. The stats show that nearly a quarter of people in the United States, of adults, admit to struggling with loneliness.
Which is obviously incredibly heightened with the pandemic, obviously.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely heightened for so many people with the pandemic. But what's interesting, Donny, and concerning is that if you look at the data around loneliness, it's associated with a number of physical and mental health effects as well. Increased risk for premature death, for cardiac disease, for dementia, for depression, anxiety, sleep disturbances, and the list goes on. And there are a lot of really interesting evolutionary reasons for this. But the key is that we evolved as human beings to be reliant on each other. Social connection was part of what helped keep us safe and kept us fulfilled. And in the modern world, what's happened, interestingly, is even though we are more connected by technology, the strength and quality of our connections for many of us has diminished over time. We have a greater quantity of connections, but often a reduced quality of connections. And what really matters is the quality of our human connection. So as we think about how we come out of this pandemic, Donny, what is most interesting and important to me is that we intentionally try to design the post-pandemic life that we want to live. I don't want us to be victims of a future that we didn't create or neglected to create. I want us to recognize that in this moment, we have a choice about what we build our lives around, about what we prioritize. So if you think about building a truly people-centered life, what does that look like in terms of where you put your time, your attention, and your energy? What does that look like as you're making decisions about what kind of job to take, where to spend your vacation time, what to do in that 5 minutes when you have the choice to call home or not, whether or not you pick up the phone call when a friend calls? These are the moment-to-moment decisions we make that often determine whether or not we are truly building our lives around people or not. And that is, I think, what we have an opportunity to really dig into as we confront the full effects of this pandemic. It's part of what I want to do as Surgeon General is to try to drive and support a conversation in our country about how we design that post-pandemic life. Because I think we have an opportunity to come out of this pandemic stronger, more resilient, more fulfilled than before, but only if we do it intentionally.
Yeah, such a big part of your raison d'etre is mental health. And it's interesting, you talked about as a kid loneliness, and I went like, okay, sure. And then you said even your first stint as Surgeon General, you were suffering from loneliness. And that's kind of a stunning thing to hear. It was the same way we saw, Simone Biles and people who we think have these just perfect lives. And yet you're telling me that you felt loneliness as Surgeon General is in this incredibly center of the universe position. What does that look when you say that I was feeling loneliness while being Surgeon General? What does that look like?
Well, the feeling of loneliness is it's a feeling of emptiness. It's a feeling of exhaustion at times, of fear. And even though I was surrounded by people all the time, Donnie, even though I was like engaging with hundreds, in some cases, thousands of people a week, what I had not done was I had not sustained the friendships and relationships that I had before I was Surgeon General. I convinced myself of a narrative that's going to sound very familiar to you. Because I said, I have this once in a lifetime opportunity to do something for the country. I'm going to pour my entire self into that job.
Sure.
And, I can catch up with friends later. I'm multitasking when I'm at the dinner table with my wife and my son, but that's okay, because I'm trying to get more work done. And ultimately that'll be a benefit, hopefully, to the public, blah, blah, blah. We convince ourselves of all these things. But what I hadn't fully appreciated was that those connections that I had with family and friends, those were my fuel. They were my buffer during stressful moments. They amplified my joy. They gave me perspective. And what friends do, Donnie, which is so incredibly valuable, is they're mirrors that help us recognize what our real values are, what our real strengths are, even in the moments when we forget. Because the thing about loneliness is it chips away at your self-esteem. It makes you feel unworthy, like you don't have value. And over time, you can come to believe that narrative. And I felt that way, many times when I was struggling with loneliness. But true friends remind you of who you are, even when you forget.
Yeah.
And by allowing those friendships to weaken and fall by the wayside, what felt like depression, what felt like isolation and despair. And I'll tell you that, one thing that helped me find a pathway out of that was a conversation that I had after I was Surgeon General, when I was still struggling with that loneliness. A conversation I had in Boston with a good friend from my residency training days. We had breakfast, and I was telling her some of the struggles I had. And she said to me, Vivek, you know what your problem is? She said, your problem is not that you don't have friends. It's that you're not experiencing friendship. She's like, your friends are still there for you.
Yeah.
She's like, if you were to pick up the phone and reach out to them, they would love to talk to you. And it reminded me that so many of us underestimate the number of people out there who truly care about us, who would be there for us in a moment of need. But sometimes it's taking the effort to make that phone call. It's taking the risk of being vulnerable and saying, you know what, I'm struggling right now. I need some help or would like to talk. Those are the moments that can be really transformative. And I had to push myself to have those conversations. But when I did, I'll tell you, Donnie, it really changed my life and changed my life for the better.
Great. That's incredibly fascinating. Mental health and you've written a book, The Healing Power of Human Connection in sometimes lonely world. Some of the stats are stunning. 10% of young people today suffer from severe depression, not just a form of depression. 25% of between 20 and 25% of adults have had some bout with mental illness in the past year. We're still stigmatized. It doesn't matter how many people come out the rock. And people, I've had some bouts with depression myself, and it's hard to say it sometimes out loud. So what do we do to help more and more of these people, and B, demystify it? It's no different than diabetes or anything else, and it is one of the proudest things in my career. When I was running my ad agency, we did a campaign for Zoloft where we just demystified. We showed these little cartoon characters and said, hey, it's just a little serotonin imbalance. And we kind of demonstrated it in a very kind of clinical way. And we still in this country, and it doesn't matter how many heroes come forward with struggles that they're having mentally, there's still this stigma that's attached to it. And how do we kind of get our arms around that even more and more and more? I know that's such a big part of your mission in your career.
Well, it is, Donnie. And because I think that as human beings, we are composite beings. We're about our physical health. We're about our mental health. We're about our spiritual health. These are all components of who we are. But strangely, we seem to neglect many of those components and focus just on the physical health in terms of what we think drives our well-being. And I think we've realized over the years that doesn't serve us well. And that when people are feeling ashamed to admit they have challenges with their mental health, it doesn't help them. Doesn't help the people around them. So what can we do? Well, I think the changing stigma is never easy, because changing cultures, is the hardest thing that you can do, right? It's much easier to change policy and build programs than it is to change culture. But I think the way you do that is it's person by person, it's community by community. It's starting conversations in communities where people have places where they can come and actually share more openly with one another. Whenever celebrities share their challenges with mental health, I think it helps to some extent. But what we really need is for that sharing to happen locally. It's like when people see that maybe their brother or their friend or their teacher actually encountered a challenge with mental health, it often means a lot because they're part of their local community. And it means, okay, well, that person struggled. Maybe I can come out, I can talk to them and be open about what I struggled with. That gives me a real outlet to have a conversation. So look, it's a challenge, but I actually do think we've made progress over recent years. If you just look at the volume of discussion, if you look at the willingness of young people in particular to talk about mental health, and this is a place where I do think young people are really going to help lead us to a better place. And it's why, like in my work on mental health, I do focus a lot on engaging with folks in their teens and 20s and 30s, because culture often changes when younger people drive culture to change. But I also know that our younger generations have a deep concern around mental health. The stats bear out that they are struggling, as well with their mental health. But I think they have a greater inclination to think about how we deal with it, perhaps in fundamentally different ways. And the way we do that is, yes, by increasing access to mental health care and to treatment. That's a really important part of it. But there are other things that are important too, Donny, that we don't talk about enough. There are, for example, programs that we have known for years work in schools, for example, that improve not only mental health, but reduce the likelihood that young people will struggle with substance use disorders down the line. They increase the likelihood of graduation, reduce teen pregnancy, reduce likelihood of involvement in the criminal justice system. They do a lot of good for our kids. They're focused on social and emotional learning, but they aren't funded and aren't implemented in many schools across the country. So these are essentially prevention programs that work and work well. But lastly, the piece around social connection we were talking about earlier, Donny, that matters so much for mental health, because it turns out that one of the most important buffers we have for our mental health and well-being are our relationships with other people. And when we live lives that are primarily driven by work or the pursuit of how modern society defines success, it often doesn't prioritize our relationships. Like if you're a young person right now, Donny, I'll tell you this, I have these conversations all the time with groups of college students and young professionals around the country to understand, like, how do they feel about the world that they're living in, the world that they're entering as professionals? And what many of them say is they use the term hustle culture. They say, we feel like we're living in this world, in this hustle culture that's driving us to constantly get a fancy job, have a fancy title, get a good salary, like all is signals of our worth. And the truth is that modern society tells us that our worth as human beings is driven by either how much money we can make, how famous we are, or how much power we have, right? So those three things are what and if you think about it, these are the stories that we tell, right? Like in movies and books, on TV, the successful people are people who've acquired fame, power, or wealth. But the reality is that you and I, Donny, both know plenty of people who are famous, powerful, and rich, and profoundly unhappy.
Yes.
Right? And that has not changed over the years. What is true, I believe, is that our worth is not really determined by those three things. That's not that those things aren't worth pursuing or they're not nice to have, but it's important for us to know what really determines our worth. And our worth is actually intrinsic. Our worth is based on our ability to give and to receive love. Fundamentally, and love in all its forms, generosity, kindness, compassion. I see that in my kids, Donny. I think a lot of parents see that in their kids at a young age, that when our kids are born, they are so free, right? They express their feelings that, as they come, but they also don't feel hampered about or hindered in expressing love or joy, like when they feel that. But things happen to us over the course of our life that make us feel like, that's maybe a childish thing to do, or it's maybe a little too squishy, or maybe like I'm weak if I'm displaying, talking about my feelings or displaying love and compassion too much. But this is what fundamentally we have to change, because what we know is people feel good when they're giving and receiving love. We know that is our true superpower. And we've got to reconnect with that and recognize that our worth is not driven by the pursuit of wealth, power, and fame, even though that's a story that many of us have been told over the years.
Yeah, just really, really, really important stuff. I'm going to let you go in a couple of minutes on how busy you are, Mr. Surgeon General. But speaking of busy, what's your day today? We're taping this in the morning, and what is, if I looked at your calendar today, and obviously it's endless possibilities of what could be taking up your time. What does the day in your life look like?
Oh my gosh. Well, Donnie, one of the wonderful things about the job is every day is really, really different. So, like yesterday, for example, I was convening a meeting at the White House with all our former surgeons general. I was, to talk about strategies for how we improve vaccination rates, particularly in minority communities. I was doing interviews, with the media to talk about what the latest surge in the Delta variant means, and about, latest news on vaccines. Today, for example, I've got some meetings with internal team members about outbreaks, with the Delta variant that we're seeing in various parts of the country that we want to bring more resources to control. I've got conversations with our commission corps leaders. This is one of the uniformed services in the U.S. government that the Surgeon General oversees, the Public Health Service Commission Corps. We've got thousands of officers who deploy to meet public health needs around the nation and around the world. So I'm meeting with our leadership there to figure out how we can support, systems around the country that are struggling in terms of their healthcare workforce. There are more media engagements I have because we're talking to the public is an important part.
Sure, you've done a great job with that. Yeah, you've done a great job with that.
Well, I know I appreciate that. It's a work in progress, and I have actually conversations today about something we internally call Project Starfish, which is our internal name for a project that we have about how we support and drive a conversation in the country about how to design the post-pandemic life. This is about how we think about what we've learned from the pandemic and how we apply it to our personal lives. I'm not just talking about what we've learned as a country about the importance of better manufacturing capacity and detection systems for disease. I'm talking about it at an individual level. Like, what have we learned about how we want to live life differently? And what's really interesting is a lot of people have had a lot of realizations during this time. But if we don't actively reflect on that and think about how we want to design our lives differently, we will snap right back to 2019,
yes.
Which had a lot of good things about it, but which wouldn't, I think, necessarily enable us to really grow from this pandemic in ways that I think we can, and to really prioritize the people and parts of our life that the pandemic has made abundantly clear are really important to our success, to our happiness, and to our fulfillment.
Final question. I know you've suffered some personal loss. You've lost family members to COVID. Any personal message of just anybody listening out there, just maybe on the tipping point of getting a vaccine, just as a person to person, as somebody who's suffered real loss?
Well, Donnie, like many people, I've lost family to COVID-19. We've lost 10 family members here in the United States and in India, where I still have extended family. What I really wish, and what I think about so often, is that they had had access to the vaccine before they got sick and ultimately passed away. I know they would have taken it in a heartbeat. I know that it could have saved their lives, but they didn't have that chance. And more than 600,000 people in our country didn't have that chance, or were not able to get the vaccine for various reasons, misinformation, lack of access. But we have a moment right now where we can save lives if we just get more people vaccinated. We've got friends around the world, other countries, that are desperate for the vaccines that we have, that would kill to get even a fraction of the supply that we've made available to the American public. The choice is up to us. Do we walk down that path of protecting not just ourselves, but the people around us, or do we continue to wait? And millions of people have gotten these vaccines. They're proven to be highly effective, really safe. The question, but nothing can be done if people don't make that active decision to take the vaccine. And finally, I just want to say this. We should get vaccinated to save our lives. The vaccines certainly work to do that. We should also get vaccinated for the kids in our society who depend on us to shield them from infection because they're too young to get vaccinated. Kids like my kids and like the kids of so many who are listening today. We should also get vaccinated for our healthcare workers who for the last 18 months have been struggling under the weight of this pandemic with hospitals that have filled up. I talked to a nurse the other day who stopped counting after his 135th patient died from COVID-19. The depression, anxiety, and PTSD that our healthcare workers are struggling with is off the charts. Many of them are burning out. Many of them are considering leaving the profession entirely. They depend on us getting vaccinated, bringing cases down, and keeping them down. So There are a lot of reasons to get vaccinated, but ultimately it is our pathway out of this pandemic. But we've got to do it together, and things don't get better unless we band together, help each other make that decision, including our family and friends. And that's when we'll see cases come down, stay down, and we'll get back to our way of life.
Amen. Mr. Surgeon General, thank you for your time. It's been a privilege. Thank you for the service to the country, and we so appreciate it, and keep up the good fight.
Thanks so much, Donny. Take care and
All
stay
right.
safe.
Have a great
your
day.
family.
You too. Same back. Hope you enjoyed my talk with the Surgeon General. Really informative, really, you could tell, a special guy with tremendous, beyond obviously credentials, with tremendous empathy, which is what I think all doctors need in addition to skills. But certainly right now, the Surgeon General needs that also. We'll see you next week on On Brand. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere else. Also go to YouTube, subscribe there also. You can watch us there. Remember to stay on brand, stay safe, and we'll see you next week on Brand.